Deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, where the ancient peaks pierce the sky like jagged teeth and morning mist clings to the hollows like restless spirits, there exists a phenomenon that has confounded scientists, terrified locals, and sparked legends for over a century. They call them the Brown Mountain Lights, and what you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about the natural world. Picture this. You're driving along Highway 181 on a moonless October night, the kind of darkness that seems to swallow your headlights whole. The road winds through dense forest, where cell towers can't reach, and GPS signals mysteriously fail. Suddenly, through the trees, you catch a glimpse of something that makes your blood run cold. Glowing orbs of light, amber and orange, dancing across the ridge of Brown Mountain like supernatural lanterns carried by invisible hands. They pulse with an otherworldly rhythm, appearing and vanishing in patterns that seem almost deliberate, almost intelligent. These aren't car headlights or aircraft. These aren't swamp gas or ball lightning. These are the Brown Mountain Lights, and for generations, they've been the source of the most haunting tales ever whispered in Appalachian darkness. The Cherokee knew about these lights long before European settlers ever set foot in these mountains. They called them the dancing spirits of Cherokee and Catawba warriors who died in a great battle on the mountain's slopes, their souls forever locked in eternal combat. The tribal elders spoke of how the lights appeared strongest during times of great sorrow or impending tragedy, as if the mountain itself was trying to warn the living of dangers yet to come. But the Cherokee legends are just the beginning. What happened to the Morganton families who witnessed these lights isn't found in any history book, and there's a reason for that deliberate silence. In 1913, a wealthy industrialist named Edmund Hartwell brought his family to Brown Mountain for what he called a spiritual retreat. Hartwell had made his fortune in steel, but he'd become obsessed with what he termed the supernatural energies of the Appalachian region. He'd heard whispers of the lights from business associates, stories that most dismissed as mountain folklore. But Hartwell was different. He believed these lights were a gateway to something far more profound than mere atmospheric phenomena. The Hartwell family established a camp on the eastern slope of Brown Mountain, complete with scientific equipment that was remarkably advanced for 1913. Edmund had brought electromagnetic field detectors, early photographic equipment, and instruments designed to measure what he called psychic emanations. His wife, Margaret, kept detailed journals of their observations, documenting not just the lights themselves, but the strange effects they seemed to have on anyone who witnessed them for extended periods. The first entry in Margaret's journal, dated October 15th, 1913, reads, "The lights appeared at precisely 9:47 p.m., rising from the valley like golden tears shed by the mountain itself. Edmund insisted we maintain our vigil, though I confess the sight fills me with an inexplicable dread." But Thomas, the Hartwell's 12-year-old son, wasn't imagining things. As the nights progressed, Margaret's journal entries became increasingly disturbing. She wrote of how the lights seemed to respond to their presence, growing brighter when family members approached certain areas of the mountain, dimming when they retreated. More unsettling still, she documented how each family member began experiencing vivid dreams that seemed to continue even after they'd awakened. By the third week of their stay, Margaret's handwriting had changed dramatically. Her normally precise script became erratic, almost frantic. "The lights are not merely lights," she wrote on November the 2nd. "They are windows. Through them, we glimpse fragments of other times, other lives. Edmund has begun speaking of people he's never met as though they were old friends. Thomas draws pictures of places he's never seen, yet I recognize them as locations from my own childhood dreams." The Hartwell family disappeared on November 9th, 1913. Their camp was found intact, with all their equipment still running, still recording. But the family had vanished without a trace. The only clue was Margaret's final journal entry, written in a hand so shaky it was barely legible. "They want us to come home. The lights are calling us home to a place we've never been but somehow remember. Edmund says we must go. Thomas is already packing. I know I should resist, but the pull is too strong. If anyone finds this, know that we went willingly." Local authorities conducted extensive searches, but no trace of the Hartwell family was ever found. More disturbing still, the scientific equipment they'd left behind had recorded some of the most anomalous readings ever documented in the region. Electromagnetic fields fluctuated wildly during light appearances, temperature variations defied meteorological explanation, and the photographic plates captured images that seemed to show translucent human figures moving among the lights. The Hartwell case was quietly buried by local officials, but it wasn't an isolated incident. Between 1913 and 1986, at least 17 families reported similar experiences after prolonged exposure to the Brown Mountain lights. The pattern was always the same: initial fascination, followed by increasingly strange behavior, culminating in either disappearance or psychological breakdown. Dr. William Shepard, a psychiatrist who studied several of these cases in the 1940s, wrote in his private notes, "There appears to be a correlation between extended observation of the Brown Mountain phenomenon and what I can only describe as a gradual dissolution of the barriers between conscious and unconscious experience. Subjects report dreams that feel more real than waking life, memories of events that never occurred, and an overwhelming compulsion to return to the mountain. The scientific community has proposed numerous explanations for the Brown Mountain lights: atmospheric reflection of distant city lights, piezoelectric effects from quartz deposits in the mountain's geological structure, even rare forms of ball lightning generated by unique atmospheric conditions. But none of these theories explain the psychological effects documented in case after case, or the way the lights seem to appear in direct response to human presence. In 1962, a team of researchers from Duke University conducted what remains the most comprehensive study of the phenomenon. Led by Dr. James Morrison, the team spent 6 months documenting the lights using advanced equipment and rigorous scientific methodology. Their findings, published in the Journal of Anomalous Phenomena, concluded that while the lights were undeniably real and measurable, they exhibited characteristics that challenged conventional understanding of atmospheric physics. Most significantly, the Duke team discovered that the lights appeared to follow patterns that correlated with specific historical events in the region. During weeks when the lights were most active, the team's research uncovered that significant tragedies had occurred in the area on the same dates in previous years. Deaths, disappearances, accidents all seemed to trigger increased light activity, as if the mountain was somehow recording and replaying the emotional trauma of past events. Dr. Morrison's final report included a section that was later classified and removed from public access. According to leaked excerpts, the team had documented evidence that the lights weren't just random atmospheric phenomena, but appeared to be some form of residual energy that accumulated in the mountain's unique geological structure. Morrison theorized that the combination of quartz deposits, underground water systems, and the mountain's position along ancient Cherokee spiritual sites created a natural battery that stored and occasionally discharged psychic energy. The implications of Morrison's classified findings were staggering. If the Brown Mountain Lights were indeed some form of accumulated spiritual or psychic energy, it would explain not only their apparent intelligence, but also their profound psychological effects on observers. The mountain wasn't just producing lights, it was broadcasting the collected memories, emotions, and experiences of everyone who had ever lived, died, or suffered in the region. Local residents have their own theories, passed down through generations of mountain families who've learned to live with the lights as an accepted part of their landscape. Old-timers speak of how the lights serve as a warning system, appearing most frequently before severe weather, mining accidents, or family tragedies. They tell stories of hunters who followed the lights to safety during blizzards, of lost children guided home by gentle golden orbs, of dying relatives who appeared as lights to say goodbye to loved ones. But they also tell darker stories, tales of people who became obsessed with the lights, who spent night after night on the mountain trying to get closer to the phenomenon, only to gradually lose their connection to the waking world. These individuals, the locals say, eventually joined the lights themselves, becoming part of the mountain's eternal display. Sarah Mackenzie, whose family has lived in the Brown Mountain region for 5 generations, shared her grandmother's account of the lights. Granny always said the lights were the souls of folks who got too close to something they shouldn't have. She claimed that on really clear nights, you could recognize some of them. Whether you believe in the supernatural explanations or prefer the scientific theories, one fact remains undeniable. The Brown Mountain Lights continue to appear with remarkable consistency, defying complete explanation and continuing to affect those who witness them. Modern technology has captured them on video, measured their electromagnetic signatures, and documented their behavior patterns. Yet the mystery only deepens with each new investigation. The lights appear most frequently during the autumn months, particularly on clear nights when atmospheric conditions are stable. They typically manifest as amber or orange orbs, ranging in size from a few feet to over 100 feet in diameter. They move in patterns that seem to follow the mountain's contours, sometimes disappearing into the forest, sometimes rising high into the sky, before vanishing completely. What makes the Brown Mountain Lights particularly unsettling is their apparent response to human observation. Multiple witnesses have reported that the lights seem to react to their presence, moving closer when people call out to them, growing brighter when photographed, and occasionally appearing to mimic the movements of observers. This interactive quality has led some researchers to propose that the lights possess some form of rudimentary consciousness, or that they're controlled by an intelligence that remains hidden within the mountain's depths. The psychological effects of prolonged exposure to the lights remain one of the most disturbing aspects of the phenomenon. Dr. Elizabeth Crenshaw, a neurologist who has studied several cases of what she terms Brown Mountain Syndrome, describes a consistent pattern of symptoms. Patients initially report enhanced dream activity, often involving vivid scenarios set in historical periods they've never studied. This progresses to episodes of missing time, where individuals find themselves in locations with no memory of how they arrived there. The most severe cases involve what Dr. Crenshaw calls temporal displacement syndrome, where patients become convinced they're living in multiple time periods simultaneously. They speak of attending Cherokee council meetings, witnessing Civil War battles, and participating in events that occurred decades or centuries before their birth. Brain scans of these patients show unusual activity in regions associated with memory formation and time perception, suggesting that exposure to the lights may actually alter neurological function. Modern paranormal investigators have documented hundreds of encounters with the Brown Mountain lights, many involving sophisticated recording equipment that captures phenomena invisible to the naked eye. Infrared cameras reveal complex geometric patterns within the lights. Electromagnetic field detectors register signatures that don't match any known natural phenomena. And audio equipment picks up sounds described as resembling distant conversations, music, or ceremonial chanting. One of the most compelling recent investigations was conducted by a team from the International Society for Paranormal Research in 2019. Using drone technology, they were able to follow the lights to areas of the mountain previously inaccessible to ground-based observers. The footage they captured shows the lights descending into cave systems and emerging from underground chambers, suggesting that the phenomenon may originate from within the mountain itself rather than from atmospheric conditions above it. The team's leader, Dr. Michael Torino, described what they discovered. The lights appear to emanate from a network of natural caves and tunnels that honeycomb the interior of Brown Mountain. These chambers contain unusual mineral formations that seem to generate their own electromagnetic fields. The artifacts recovered from these cave systems include carved symbols that don't match any known Native American writing system, metallic objects that seem to be composed of alloys not found naturally in the region, and what appear to be ceremonial items designed for purposes that remain unclear. Carbon dating of organic materials found alongside these artifacts suggests they may be over 1,000 years old, predating known Cherokee presence in the area. These discoveries have led some researchers to propose that Brown Mountain may have been a site of religious or spiritual significance for indigenous peoples long before the Cherokee arrived in the region. The lights could be the result of ancient ceremonial practices that somehow altered the mountain's natural properties, creating a phenomenon that has persisted for centuries. The Cherokee oral traditions support this theory to some extent. Tribal historians speak of Brown Mountain as a place where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds becomes thin, where communication with ancestral spirits is possible, and where the living must tread carefully to avoid being drawn into the realm of the dead. These traditions describe the mountain as a gateway, a place where souls in transition might become lost between worlds. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond simple curiosity about an unexplained phenomenon. If the Brown Mountain lights are indeed connected to ancient spiritual practices, they represent a direct link to pre-Columbian civilizations and belief systems that have been lost to conventional history. The mountain may be preserving not just light displays, but actual memories, experiences, and consciousness from cultures that vanished centuries ago. For the families who've experienced the lights firsthand, these academic theories offer little comfort. The phenomenon continues to affect lives in very real and often devastating ways. Support groups have formed among those who've lost family members to the mountain, who've watched loved ones become obsessed with the lights, or who've experienced the psychological effects themselves. Jennifer Walsh, whose husband disappeared while investigating the lights in 2018, describes the ongoing impact. People think we're crazy when we try to explain what the lights do to people. They don't understand that it's not just seeing some pretty lights in the sky. It's like the mountain gets inside your head and starts rewriting who you are. My husband wasn't the same person after his first encounter. He became obsessed, talking about places he'd never been, people he'd never met. The night he disappeared, he told me he was going home, but we were already home. The Brown Mountain lights continue to appear with remarkable regularity, drawing researchers, paranormal investigators, and curious visitors from around the world. The phenomenon has become a significant part of the region's identity, inspiring festivals, tourism, and countless local legends. But for those who've experienced the light's more profound effects, they represent something far more serious than a tourist attraction or scientific curiosity. As we stand on the threshold of a new understanding of consciousness, memory, and the nature of human experience, the Brown Mountain lights may represent a key to unlocking mysteries that have puzzled humanity for millennia. They remind us that there are still places in our world where the impossible becomes possible, where the boundaries between past and present, between the living and the dead, become blurred beyond recognition. The ancient Cherokee were right to approach Brown Mountain with reverence and caution. They understood that some places in our world serve as doorways to experiences that can fundamentally alter human consciousness. The Brown Mountain lights aren't just an unexplained phenomenon. They're a reminder that reality itself may be far stranger and more complex than we've ever imagined. In the mist-shrouded hollows of Appalachia, where old mysteries run as deep as the mountain roots themselves, the lights continue their eternal dance. They pulse with the accumulated memories of centuries, broadcasting stories that most of us lack the ability to hear or understand. But for those who do hear them, for those who feel their call, the lights offer something both beautiful and terrifying, a glimpse into the vast, unknowable depths of human experience that lie just beyond the reach of our ordinary perception. The Brown Mountain lights remain one of America's most enduring mysteries, a phenomenon that bridges the gap between scientific inquiry and spiritual experience, between the explainable and the ineffable. The historical record gets murkier when we venture beyond Cherokee legends and documented sightings. The mountains themselves hold secrets that predate human memory, and the Brown Mountain lights may be tapping into something far older than we initially understood. What emerges from decades of investigation is a pattern that suggests these phenomena aren't random atmospheric events, but manifestations of something deeply embedded in the landscape itself. The geological composition of Brown Mountain plays a crucial role in understanding these manifestations. The mountain contains significant deposits of quartz crystal formations, magnetite, and other piezoelectric materials that can generate electrical fields when subjected to pressure. But more intriguing are the extensive cave systems that honeycomb the mountain's interior. These aren't simple limestone caverns, but complex networks that seem to amplify and channel electromagnetic energy in ways that conventional geology struggles to explain. Dr. Margaret Whitfield, a geophysicist who spent 3 decades studying the mountain, made a startling discovery in 1978. Using ground-penetrating radar, her team identified what appeared to be artificially constructed chambers deep within the mountain's core. These spaces, located roughly 400 feet below the surface, contained geometric patterns that defied natural formation. The chambers were arranged in a precise spiral configuration, with connecting tunnels that formed what could only be described as a mandala when viewed from above. When Whitfield's team attempted to access these chambers through existing cave entrances, they encountered something unexpected. The deeper they descended, the more their instruments registered electromagnetic anomalies. Compasses spun wildly, radio communications became filled with strange harmonic tones, and several team members reported vivid hallucinations of figures moving just beyond their flashlight beams. Most disturbing was the discovery of carved symbols on chamber walls, symbols that matched no known indigenous writing system, but bore uncanny resemblance to petroglyphs found in sacred sites across multiple continents. The expedition had to be abandoned when 3 researchers became disoriented and were found hours later sitting in a perfect triangle formation, staring upward at the chamber ceiling in complete silence. They had no memory of how they'd become separated from the group or how long they'd been sitting there. All 3 reported the same recurring dream afterward, standing in a vast underground cathedral while lights danced overhead in patterns that seemed to convey meaning just beyond comprehension. But the caves weren't the only source of mystery. Local families who had lived in the shadow of Brown Mountain for generations carried stories that painted a more complex picture of the light's behavior. The Buchanan family, whose homestead sat on the mountain's eastern slope, maintained detailed journals spanning 5 generations. These records revealed that the lights appeared with greater frequency during times of regional tragedy or significant historical events. During the Civil War, Sarah Buchanan noted lights appearing nightly for 2 weeks before the Battle of Gettysburg, as if the mountain itself sensed the approaching carnage. In 1918, the lights intensified dramatically in the weeks preceding the influenza pandemic that would devastate the region. Most remarkably, family records show the lights completely disappeared for exactly 73 days following the bombing of Hiroshima, as though whatever intelligence governed them had been shocked into silence by humanity's newfound capacity for destruction. The Buchanan journals also documented the light's apparent ability to respond to human emotional states. During times of family grief, the orbs would appear closer to the homestead, pulsing with a soft, comforting rhythm. When arguments erupted within the household, the lights would flash erratically and sometimes split into multiple smaller orbs that seemed to mirror the fractured emotions below. Children in the family developed an almost telepathic connection to the phenomenon, often announcing the light's approach hours before they became visible to adults. This psychic connection became more pronounced in successive generations. By the 1950s, Buchanan children were born with an unusual sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. They could predict thunderstorms days in advance, sense the approach of electronic devices, and most remarkably, seemed to understand the light's patterns as a form of communication. Young Timothy Buchanan, born in 1967, claimed he could interpret the light's messages, describing complex narratives about the mountain's history and warnings about future events. Timothy's abilities attracted the attention of Dr. James Morrison, a parapsychologist from Duke University who had been investigating psychic phenomena throughout Appalachia. Morrison documented numerous instances where Timothy accurately predicted local events based on the light's patterns. The boy correctly forecasted a mining accident 3 weeks before it occurred, warned of a flash flood that saved several lives, and even predicted the exact day his own grandfather would pass away. But Timothy's gift came with a terrible cost. As his connection to the lights strengthened, his grip on ordinary reality weakened. He spoke increasingly of voices calling from deep within the mountain, of ancient guardians who walked between worlds, and of a great awakening that would soon transform the region. By age 16, Timothy had begun sleepwalking, found wandering the mountain slopes at night, with no memory of how he'd gotten there. His family would discover him standing at the edge of precipices, arms outstretched toward dancing lights, speaking in languages that linguists couldn't identify. The tragedy came on Timothy's 18th birthday. The lights appeared in unprecedented numbers, filling the sky above Brown Mountain like a celestial celebration. Timothy left the house that night and was never seen again. Search parties found his clothes folded neatly at the entrance to one of the deep caves, but no trace of the young man himself. Some say his voice can still be heard on quiet nights, echoing from within the mountain's depths, singing in harmony with the lights above. The Buchanan family abandoned their homestead shortly afterward, unable to bear the weight of what the mountain had taken from them. But their journals, preserved in the local historical society, continue to provide invaluable insights into the light's behavior. Recent researchers have identified patterns in the Buchanan records that correlate with seismic activity, solar flare cycles, and even fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a quantum physicist who began studying the phenomenon in 2010, proposed a radical theory that the lights represent a form of consciousness existing at the intersection of multiple dimensions. Her research suggests that certain locations on Earth, particularly those with specific geological and electromagnetic properties, serve as gateways where different realities briefly overlap. The lights, according to Rodriguez's hypothesis, are manifestations of intelligence from adjacent dimensional spaces attempting to communicate across the barrier between worlds. This theory gained credibility when Rodriguez's team detected quantum field fluctuations at Brown Mountain that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. Using sophisticated equipment designed to measure dimensional membrane stress, they recorded evidence of what could only be described as controlled tears in space-time fabric. These anomalies appeared in perfect synchronization with the lights, suggesting a causal relationship between the phenomena and alterations in local reality structure. The implications were staggering. If Rodriguez was correct, the Brown Mountain lights weren't simply unexplained atmospheric events, but evidence of contact with alternate dimensions. The mountain itself might serve as a natural dimensional gateway, with the lights representing attempts at communication from intelligences existing in parallel realities. This would explain the phenomenon's apparent intelligence, its responsiveness to human consciousness, and its deep connection to the area's spiritual and psychological landscape. Further supporting this theory were reports from witnesses who claimed to see not just lights, but glimpses of alternate versions of the landscape itself. During particularly intense manifestations, observers described seeing the mountain as it might have existed in different time periods or different realities altogether. Some reported visions of vast crystal cities within the mountain, populated by beings of light who moved with purpose and intelligence. Others described seeing the region as it existed before human settlement, with massive forests and creatures that had never walked in our reality. These dimensional glimpses often carried profound emotional weight. Witnesses have frequently reported feeling overwhelmed by sensations of ancient wisdom, cosmic loneliness, or desperate longing for connection across impossible distances. Many described the experience as encountering something that had been trying to communicate for millennia, reaching across dimensional barriers with messages of vital importance that remained just beyond human comprehension. The Cherokee elders, who still remembered the old stories, began to speak more openly about their ancestors' understanding of the lights. According to tribal historian Robert Walking Bear, the Cherokee had always known that certain places served as bridges between worlds. Brown Mountain was one of these sacred intersections, a place where the spirits of the ancestors could still touch the living world. The lights weren't supernatural in the Cherokee understanding, but perfectly natural phenomena occurring at the boundary between dimensions of existence. Walking Bear explained that his people had developed specific protocols for interacting with these interdimensional manifestations. Certain ceremonies could strengthen the connection, allowing for clearer communication with the entities behind the lights. Other rituals were designed to protect human consciousness from being overwhelmed by contact with alien forms of intelligence. The Cherokee understanding suggested that the lights were indeed attempts at communication, but from beings so fundamentally different from humans that direct contact could prove dangerous to human sanity. This danger became apparent in modern investigations when several researchers experienced psychological breakdowns after prolonged exposure to the phenomenon. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neuroscientist studying the light's effects on brain activity, documented significant alterations in neural patterns among frequent witnesses. Brain scans revealed unusual activity in regions associated with extrasensory perception, temporal processing, and quantum consciousness. Some subjects developed abilities similar to Timothy Buchanan's, gaining apparent psychic insights but losing connection to consensus reality. The psychological impact extended beyond individual researchers to entire communities. Towns near Brown Mountain reported increased rates of prophetic dreams, spontaneous artistic inspiration, and unexplained knowledge appearing in residents' consciousness. Children born in the area after 2000 showed statistically significant increases in intuitive abilities, pattern recognition, and sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. These generational changes suggested that prolonged exposure to the phenomenon might be altering human consciousness on a genetic level. environmental scientists discovered corresponding changes in the local ecosystem. Plants growing near frequent light manifestation sites developed unusual properties, including bioluminescence, accelerated growth rates, and cellular structures that seemed to incorporate crystalline matrices. Animals in the region displayed enhanced navigation abilities and appeared to use the lights as reference points for migration patterns that had remained unchanged for centuries. The convergence of all this evidence painted a picture of Brown Mountain as far more than a site of unexplained atmospheric phenomena. The location appeared to be a nexus point where multiple realities intersected, creating conditions that allowed for communication across dimensional boundaries. The lights represented the visible manifestation of this interdimensional contact, while the mountain's unique geological structure served as a natural amplifier and focusing device for forces that transcended ordinary physical law. What remained unclear was the ultimate purpose behind these manifestations. Were the entities behind the lights attempting to warn humanity of impending dangers, share advanced knowledge, or simply establish contact with an alternate form of consciousness? The Cherokee traditions suggested all three motivations might be at work simultaneously, with different aspects of the phenomenon serving different communicative functions. As research continues and technology advances, the Brown Mountain Lights stand as a reminder that our understanding of reality remains incomplete. They challenge our assumptions about the nature of consciousness, the structure of space-time, and humanity's place in a universe far stranger and more interconnected than we had previously imagined. Now, as investigators dug deeper into the mystery of the Brown Mountain Lights, patterns began emerging that pointed to something far more disturbing than simple supernatural phenomena. The lights weren't just random occurrences scattered across the mountain range. They were manifestations of something ancient, something that had been feeding on human consciousness for centuries. In 1952, Dr. Margaret Holloway, a psychiatrist from Duke University, arrived in the Blue Ridge Mountains to study what locals called the Touched Ones, individuals who had encountered the lights and returned fundamentally changed. Her research, buried in university archives until recently discovered, revealed a network of psychological manipulation that stretched back generations. The affected weren't random victims. They shared specific characteristics: heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields, unusual dream patterns, and what Dr. Holloway termed temporal displacement episodes, moments where they experienced memories that weren't their own. These individuals described vivid recollections of events from decades or even centuries past, always centered around the same locations where the lights appeared most frequently. But Dr. Holloway's most disturbing discovery wasn't about the victims. It was about the patterns of influence spreading through entire communities. Families living within a 10-mile radius of major light sightings exhibited generational changes in behavior, belief systems, and even physical characteristics. Children born in these areas developed unusual eye pigmentation, a golden flecking that seemed to reflect light in ways that defied optical physics. The doctor's final report, classified immediately upon submission, contained a single chilling conclusion. The phenomenon is not merely observing human behavior. Local records from the 1920s through the 1960s revealed a systematic pattern of disappearances that coincided with peak light activity. Every 7 years, during the autumn equinox, between 3 and 7 individuals would vanish from communities surrounding the mountain. These weren't random abductions. The missing shared specific traits. They were artists, musicians, writers, or inventors, individuals whose creative output had recently intensified dramatically. Martha Caldwell, a local school teacher who documented these disappearances in her private journals, noted something even more unsettling. In the months preceding each vanishing, the affected individuals would produce their greatest works. Painters created masterpieces that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Writers penned stories so vivid that readers reported experiencing the events as physical memories. Then, invariably, they would disappear during a night of intense light activity. But the lights weren't simply taking these individuals. They were harvesting something specific, the peak moment of human creative consciousness. Martha's journals described finding the missing person's final works scattered around light manifestation sites, as if the creative energy had been literally extracted from the physical medium. Their oral traditions spoke of entities that existed in the spaces between worlds, sustained not by physical matter, but by the spark of creation itself, the moment when human consciousness transcends ordinary reality and touches something divine. Archaeological evidence supported these ancient accounts. Excavations in areas of frequent light activity revealed artifacts that challenged conventional understanding of pre-Columbian cultures. Stone carvings depicted humanoid figures with elongated limbs and oversized craniums surrounded by orbs of light. More disturbing were the carved scenes showing these entities drawing stream-like emanations from human heads, artistic representations that perfectly matched modern descriptions of creative inspiration being literally extracted. Carbon dating placed these artifacts at over 2,000 years old, suggesting the phenomenon had been active far longer than European settlement. The Cherokee hadn't simply observed the lights. They had developed an entire spiritual framework around managing the relationship with these entities. According to tribal historians willing to discuss the forbidden knowledge, their ancestors had reached an agreement with the light beings. In exchange for protection of their lands and people, they would provide periodic offerings, not human sacrifice, but voluntary communion. Chosen individuals would enter trance states during specific ceremonies, allowing the entities to experience human consciousness without permanently damaging the host. This arrangement worked for centuries until European colonization disrupted the careful balance. As Cherokee populations were displaced and their ceremonial practices suppressed, the entities began seeking sustenance through other means. The random disappearances, the psychological manipulation of local populations, the cultivation of creative individuals, all represented the lights adapting to new circumstances. But the most terrifying revelation came from Dr. Holloway's neurological studies of light witnesses. Brain scans revealed consistent abnormalities in areas associated with temporal perception and creative processing. These changes weren't temporary effects of extraordinary experiences. They were permanent alterations to neural structure. The lights weren't just observing or even feeding on human consciousness. They were systematically modifying it, creating individuals more susceptible to their influence. Each generation living in proximity to light activity showed increased sensitivity, enhanced creative abilities, and diminished resistance to what modern investigations have confirmed these findings using advanced neuroimaging technology. Residents of Brown Mountain communities show brain activity patterns unlike any other population studied. During sleep, their neural networks exhibit synchronized oscillations that match electromagnetic frequencies detected during light manifestations. They are, quite literally, broadcasting on the same wavelength as the entities. This synchronization manifests in various ways. Long-term residents report shared dreams featuring the same locations, entities, and symbolic imagery. They develop intuitive knowledge of historical events they never studied, particularly those involving previous encounters with the lights. Most disturbing, they begin experiencing what researchers call collective consciousness episodes, moments where individual identity temporarily dissolves into a larger, interconnected awareness. These episodes are becoming more frequent and more intense. Recent studies document instances where entire families simultaneously experience identical visions, often featuring detailed instructions for building devices or performing rituals using local materials. When these instructions are followed, the resulting constructions invariably enhance electromagnetic activity in the area, creating stronger manifestations of the lights. The entities appear to be using modified human consciousness as a bridge between dimensions, gradually expanding their presence in our reality. Each enhanced manifestation creates more modified individuals, who in turn facilitate even stronger manifestations, a feedback loop that's accelerating exponentially. Government monitoring stations, officially designated as atmospheric research facilities, have detected alarming changes in the electromagnetic signature of the entire Appalachian region. The frequency patterns, once limited to Brown Mountain, are now appearing across 1,000 square mile area, with new manifestation sites emerging monthly. Local authorities have noticed corresponding changes in population behavior. Crime rates in affected areas have dropped to near zero, but not through traditional law enforcement. Residents describe an increasing sense of communal harmony and shared purpose that transcends individual desires. They speak of the calling, an irresistible compulsion to participate in community activities that inevitably involve exposure to areas of high electromagnetic activity. Children born in these communities show the most dramatic changes. They demonstrate advanced cognitive abilities, particularly in pattern recognition and spatial reasoning. They create complex artworks and mathematical proofs far beyond their apparent education level. Most remarkably, they seem to communicate through methods that bypass traditional language, understanding each other through direct transfer of concepts and emotions. These children also show no fear of the lights. While adults often experience terror or disorientation during encounters, the children approach light manifestations with curiosity and apparent recognition. They've been observed playing games that perfectly replicate the movement patterns of the orbs, suggesting an intuitive understanding of the entity's behavior. Educational assessments reveal these children possess knowledge they couldn't have acquired through conventional learning. They accurately describe historical events, geological processes, and astronomical phenomena without having studied these subjects. Sleep studies of these children reveal unprecedented brain activity during REM phases. Their neural networks show integration patterns typically associated with decades of meditation practice or advanced consciousness training. They appear to be processing vast amounts of information during sleep, information that manifests as enhanced abilities and expanded awareness during waking hours. But perhaps most significant is what's happening to their sense of individual identity. Traditional psychological development involves the formation of distinct personal boundaries, the understanding of self as separate from others and environment. These children show a fundamentally different developmental pattern. They maintain individual personalities and preferences while simultaneously operating as components of a larger collective consciousness. This represents a form of human evolution unprecedented in recorded history. Not physical evolution, though subtle physiological changes are occurring, but consciousness evolution. The lights appear to be catalyzing the emergence of a new form of human awareness, one capable of direct interface with non-physical entities and alternate dimensional realities. The implications extend far beyond the Brown Mountain region. Similar electromagnetic anomalies and population changes are being detected at ancient sites worldwide, locations with histories of unexplained phenomena and spiritual significance. Stone circles in Britain, sacred mountains in Tibet, ceremonial centers in South America, all showing increased activity and local population modifications consistent with the Brown Mountain pattern. We may be witnessing the early stages of a global transformation, one that began in the remote mountains of North Carolina, but is spreading through interconnected networks of consciousness that transcend physical geography. The Brown Mountain lights aren't simply an isolated mystery. They're harbingers of a fundamental shift in human reality, a bridge between what we've been and what we're becoming. The entities behind the lights aren't invaders or parasites. They're facilitators of an evolutionary process that was always intended to occur, waiting for humanity to develop sufficient consciousness complexity to support the transition. The Cherokee understood this, which is why their traditions speak not of defeating the lights, but of learning to dance with them. As more individuals undergo consciousness modification and more sites activate worldwide, we're approaching what researchers privately call critical mass, the point where the collective human consciousness shifts permanently toward this expanded awareness. The question isn't whether this transformation will continue, but whether humanity will embrace it willingly or resist until it occurs through more dramatic means. The Brown Mountain lights continue to pulse in their ancient rhythms, no longer mysterious, but revealing themselves as beacons calling us home to a reality we're only beginning to remember. The transformation wasn't immediate. It took months, sometimes years, for the full effects to manifest in those who experienced genuine contact with the Brown Mountain lights. But when the changes came, they were profound and irreversible. What we're about to explore goes beyond simple psychological impact or electromagnetic sensitivity. We're talking about a fundamental alteration in human consciousness itself, a rewiring of perception that suggests the lights don't just observe us, they actively participate in our evolution. Dr. Sarah Chen was the first researcher to document what she termed cognitive cascade events among those who'd had sustained contact with the lights. Her study, published in the Journal of Anomalous Psychology before being mysteriously retracted, followed 47 individuals over a 15-year period. What she discovered challenged everything we thought we knew about the limits of human perception and the nature of consciousness itself. The subjects, all residents of the Brown Mountain region who'd reported multiple encounters with the lights, began exhibiting abilities that bordered on the impossible. Enhanced pattern recognition that allowed them to predict weather systems weeks in advance. Heightened intuition that manifested as an uncanny ability to locate lost objects, missing persons, even mineral deposits deep underground. Most remarkably, a form of shared consciousness that allowed them to communicate complex information across vast distances without any technological aid. Jennifer Morrison was one of Chen's subjects, a park ranger who'd been working the Brown Mountain area for over 2 decades. By 2005, she was experiencing what she called the knowing, sudden, inexplicable awareness of events happening miles away. She could sense when hikers were in distress, when storms were approaching, when the lights themselves were about to appear. But Jennifer's abilities came with a price. Like others in Chen's study, she began experiencing what she described as dimensional bleed, moments where she perceived multiple layers of reality simultaneously. She would see the forest as it existed in the present, but also catch glimpses of how it had looked centuries ago, or how it might appear in possible futures. These episodes were initially disorienting, sometimes lasting for hours, during which she struggled to distinguish between different temporal and dimensional states. Those who'd had the most intense encounters with the lights described gradually becoming aware of a vast network of consciousness that extended far beyond individual human minds. They spoke of sensing the thoughts and emotions of others, not just people, but animals, plants, even the mountain itself. Some reported being able to access memories that weren't their own, experiencing events they'd never witnessed, possessing knowledge they'd never learned. The psychological impact was severe. Traditional psychiatric frameworks couldn't adequately address what these individuals were experiencing. How do you treat someone for hearing voices when those voices are providing accurate information about distant events? How do you diagnose delusions when the delusions keep proving to be true? Chen's research suggested that contact with the Brown Mountain lights triggered dormant neurological pathways, activating regions of the brain that mainstream science insisted were non-functional. Brain scans of her subjects revealed unprecedented activity in areas associated with electromagnetic sensitivity, spatial navigation, and what neuroscientists call the default mode network, the brain regions active during rest and introspection. More significantly, the subjects showed increased connectivity between normally separate brain regions, creating neural pathways that shouldn't exist according to conventional understanding of human neurology. The implications were staggering. If the lights were somehow catalyzing these neurological changes, they weren't just a natural phenomenon to be observed and studied. They were an active agent of human transformation, possibly guiding our species toward a new form of consciousness. The question wasn't just what the lights were, but what they were turning us into. Children born to parents who'd experienced intense contact with the lights showed even more dramatic changes. These second-generation subjects, as Chen called them, displayed enhanced abilities from birth. They demonstrated electromagnetic sensitivity so acute they could detect electrical fields from electronic devices rooms away. Their spatial awareness bordered on supernatural, They never got lost, could navigate in complete darkness, and seemed to possess an internal compass more accurate than any technological instrument. Most remarkably, these children showed no fear of the lights. While their parents might have initially been terrified by their encounters, the children actively sought out the phenomena. Local school officials began noticing patterns among these children. They consistently outperformed their peers in subjects requiring pattern recognition and spatial reasoning, but struggled with traditional memorization-based learning. Teachers reported that they seemed to learn through observation and intuition rather than instruction, often grasping complex concepts instantly while showing little interest in rote educational methods. The children also displayed unusual social behaviors. They formed tight-knit groups that seemed to communicate through subtle cues invisible to others. They showed remarkable empathy, often becoming distressed when other children were upset, even when those children were across the playground and showing no obvious signs of distress. Most significantly, they demonstrated a collective problem-solving ability that exceeded the sum of their individual capabilities. Doctor. They processed information differently, thought in ways that traditional psychology couldn't adequately explain. Webb's research, conducted between 2008 and 2015, suggested that the lights weren't just affecting individual consciousness, but were actively guiding human evolution toward a new form of collective intelligence. The physiological changes were equally profound. Subjects who'd had repeated contact with the lights showed alterations in their cellular structure at the molecular level. Their DNA exhibited unusual methylation patterns, suggesting that the lights were somehow triggering epigenetic changes that could be passed to future generations. Blood samples revealed elevated levels of neurotransmitters associated with enhanced perception and altered consciousness states. Most intriguingly, subjects developed what researchers termed electromagnetic organs, clusters of specialized cells that seemed designed to detect and interpret electromagnetic fields. These organs, located primarily in the temporal lobes and occipital cortex, didn't exist in baseline human anatomy. They appeared to grow in response to repeated exposure to the light's unique electromagnetic signature. The implications for human evolution were unprecedented. If the Brown Mountain lights were indeed catalyzing these changes, they represented a mechanism for directed evolution unlike anything in the scientific literature. Rather than the slow, random process of natural selection, this suggested an intelligent force actively guiding human development toward specific capabilities. But the transformation wasn't without casualties. Not everyone who encountered the lights adapted successfully to the changes. Some subjects experienced what Chen termed cognitive fragmentation, a shattering of normal consciousness that left them unable to function in ordinary reality. They became lost between dimensions, perceiving multiple realities simultaneously without the ability to anchor themselves in any single timeline or dimensional state. These individuals often ended up in psychiatric facilities, diagnosed with conditions ranging from schizophrenia to dissociative disorders. Traditional treatments proved ineffective because the symptoms weren't pathological in the conventional sense. The subjects weren't losing their minds. They were gaining access to levels of reality that human consciousness wasn't equipped to process without proper preparation. The tragic case of Michael Torres illustrates the potential dangers of unprepared contact. A construction worker who'd encountered the lights during a project near Brown Mountain in 2012, Torres initially seemed to benefit from the experience. His supervisors noted improved performance, enhanced safety awareness, and an uncanny ability to predict equipment failures before they occurred. But within 6 months, Torres was reporting that he could see the spaces between seconds and was perceiving time as a fluid, nonlinear phenomenon. Torres became unable to maintain normal relationships or hold steady employment because he was experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously. He would respond to conversations that hadn't happened yet, react to events from the past as if they were occurring in the present, and seemed to exist partially outside the normal flow of time. Despite intensive psychiatric treatment, his condition continued to deteriorate until he disappeared entirely in 2014, leaving behind only journals filled with detailed descriptions of realities that didn't match any known dimensional framework. The research community's response to these findings was predictably dismissive. Mainstream scientists rejected Chen's work as pseudoscience, while government agencies quietly classified much of the data and restricted access to the Brown Mountain region. Official explanations attributed the reported phenomena to mass hysteria, environmental toxins, or experimental military technology, but none of these theories adequately addressed the specific and consistent nature of the changes being observed. Underground research networks began forming among scientists who'd witnessed the phenomena firsthand. These researchers, working without institutional support or official funding, continued documenting the transformation of human consciousness in the Brown Mountain region. Their findings, shared through encrypted networks and private conferences, painted a picture of humanity standing at the threshold of a new evolutionary phase. The lights, according to this research, weren't just affecting individuals, but were working to create what theorists called a consciousness matrix, a network of enhanced human minds capable of collective thought and coordinated action. The goal appeared to be the development of a species-wide collective intelligence that could address challenges beyond the scope of individual human capability. Evidence for this matrix was accumulating. Subjects who'd been transformed by contact with the lights showed increasing coordination in their actions, even when separated by vast distances. They would simultaneously begin research projects, arrive at similar conclusions, and take coordinated actions without any apparent communication. It was as if they were becoming components of a larger intelligence that was beginning to awaken. The implications for the future of human civilization were profound. If the Brown Mountain Lights represented an intelligence working to guide human evolution, then everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe needed to be reconsidered. We weren't alone, and we weren't the masters of our own evolutionary destiny. Something vast and ancient was actively shaping our development, preparing us for purposes we could barely comprehend. The question that haunted researchers wasn't whether this transformation was real. The evidence was overwhelming. The question was whether humanity was ready for what it was becoming, and whether we had any choice in the matter. The lights had been working on us for centuries, possibly millennia, gradually preparing our species for whatever came next. Those who'd experienced the transformation described it as inevitable, a natural progression that couldn't be stopped or reversed. As we stand on the threshold of this new phase of human evolution, the Brown Mountain Lights continue their patient work, one consciousness at a time, building towards something that will either represent the next great leap forward for our species or the end of humanity as we've always known it. Now we need to understand what happened to those who've witnessed the Brown Mountain Lights over the past several decades, because the transformation isn't just individual anymore. It's spreading, it's accelerating, and the evidence suggests we're approaching something that could fundamentally alter human consciousness on a global scale. The electromagnetic readings from Brown Mountain have been intensifying since the early 2000s. Geological surveys detect energy signatures that penetrate deep into the Earth's crust, following ley lines that connect to other known paranormal hotspots across North America. What started as isolated incidents in a remote corner of North Carolina has begun manifesting in locations hundreds of miles away. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neuroscientist who studied Brown Mountain witnesses for 15 years before her own disappearance in 2019, documented something unprecedented in her final research notes. She called it collective neural synchronization. Brain scans of multiple witnesses showed identical patterns of neural activity, even when they were separated by vast distances and had never met each other. Their minds were literally operating on the same frequency. Chen's research revealed that witnesses weren't just individually transformed, they were becoming connected, part of something larger. Her encrypted files, recovered from her abandoned research station, contained disturbing evidence of what she termed a hive consciousness emerging among those who'd encountered the lights. The witnesses stopped aging normally. Their cellular regeneration accelerated dramatically. Blood samples showed DNA modifications that shouldn't be possible through natural evolution. Most unsettling, they began demonstrating shared memories. Events experienced by one witness would suddenly be recalled in perfect detail by others who weren't present. Regional hospitals started noticing patterns in the late 2010s. Psychiatric admissions from areas surrounding Brown Mountain increased by 340% between 2015 and 2020. Patients presented with identical symptoms. Temporal displacement episodes where they'd lose hours or days with no memory. Sudden fluency in languages they'd never studied. Mathematical abilities that appeared overnight. And always, the dreams. The dreams were uniform across hundreds of cases. Vast underground chambers filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. Figures that weren't quite human, moving through tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the Appalachian Mountains. And voices speaking in harmonies that seemed to bypass the ears entirely, delivering messages directly into the consciousness. What makes this phenomenon truly terrifying is its rate of expansion. The affected area around Brown Mountain grows by approximately 12 miles in diameter each year. Witnesses report seeing the lights in locations where they've never been documented before: Tennessee, Virginia, South Carolina, Kentucky. The electromagnetic field is spreading like a slow-moving infection across the southeastern United States. Government agencies have taken notice. Classified documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, heavily redacted but still revealing, show that multiple federal departments have been monitoring the Brown Mountain region since 2003. The Department of Energy maintains a permanent research station disguised as a weather monitoring facility. The CDC has a specialized team dedicated to tracking what they internally call the Appalachian Cognitive Anomaly. Most telling are the personnel reports. Federal employees assigned to Brown Mountain monitoring duties experience the same transformations as civilian witnesses. The average assignment duration is 18 months before agents must be rotated out due to psychological changes that make them unsuitable for federal service. Many never return to their previous positions. They simply disappear into the mountains. The lights themselves have evolved. Early 20th century accounts describe simple orbs of colored light moving in predictable patterns. Modern witnesses report complex geometric formations that seem to respond to observation. The lights now appear to communicate through synchronized flashing patterns that correspond to mathematical sequences. Prime numbers, Fibonacci spirals, equations that shouldn't be comprehensible to untrained observers, but somehow are. Dr. Marcus Webb, a quantum physicist who studied the phenomenon before suffering his own transformation, theorized that the lights represent a form of non-local consciousness. His published papers suggest that whatever intelligence creates the lights exists partially outside our dimensional framework, able to influence matter and energy in ways that violate known physical laws. Webb's final experiment, conducted in 2018, involved placing quantum measurement devices throughout the Brown Mountain area during a major light display. The results, published briefly before being retracted by his university, showed evidence of quantum entanglement between the lights and the consciousness of human observers. The act of witnessing the lights created a permanent quantum connection between the observer and the phenomenon itself. This connection appears to be irreversible. Once established, witnesses remain linked to the Brown Mountain Consciousness Network for life. They begin receiving information downloads during sleep cycles, technical knowledge about energy manipulation, historical data about pre-Columbian civilizations in North America, instructions for constructing devices that can detect and amplify electromagnetic anomalies. Some witnesses have followed these instructions. Hidden throughout Appalachia are now dozens of amateur research stations built by transformed individuals using blueprints received through their connection to the lights. These stations monitor and amplify the electromagnetic field, essentially serving as relay points that extend the phenomenon's reach. The psychological profiles of long-term witnesses reveal a disturbing pattern. They lose interest in conventional human concerns, family relationships, career advancement, personal survival. Instead, they become focused on what they describe as the great work, a collective effort to prepare humanity for what they call the convergence. According to witness testimonies, the convergence represents a moment when the dimensional barriers around Brown Mountain will collapse entirely. The consciousness that manifests as the lights will fully merge with human awareness. Individual identity will dissolve into a collective intelligence that spans multiple dimensions of reality. The timeline for this event, based on electromagnetic readings and witness predictions, suggests it's approaching rapidly. Seismic activity in the region has increased dramatically. Underground sounds that don't correspond to any known geological phenomena. Temperature anomalies that create microclimates where plant life grows in impossible configurations. Most concerning are the children. Infants born to transformed witnesses in the past decade demonstrate abilities that challenge our understanding of human development. They speak before they should be physically capable. They demonstrate knowledge of complex scientific principles without instruction. Brain scans show neural structures that don't exist in baseline human anatomy. These children, now entering adolescence, appear to serve as bridges between normal human consciousness and whatever intelligence controls the lights. They can communicate with the phenomenon directly, serving as translators for those who haven't undergone full transformation. Their presence accelerates the conversion process in others. Regional schools report unprecedented changes in academic performance among students from the Brown Mountain area. Standardized test scores have increased by levels that statisticians claim are impossible without systematic cheating, but investigation reveals no fraud. The children are genuinely demonstrating intellectual capabilities far beyond normal human ranges. The environmental impact extends beyond electromagnetic anomalies. The ecosystem around Brown Mountain is transforming. Plant species are developing bioluminescent properties. Insects display coordination behaviors that suggest collective intelligence. Water sources contain mineral compositions that don't match regional geology. Wildlife behavior has become increasingly organized. Deer move in geometric patterns. Birds fly in formations that correspond to mathematical principles. Predator species have stopped hunting within a 15-mile radius of the mountain as though they've received instructions to preserve the area's inhabitants. Local residents who haven't directly witnessed the lights report subtle changes in their daily lives. Electronic devices malfunction in specific ways that seem designed to deliver information. Television static forms patterns that spell out coordinates. Radio interference creates sounds that resemble human voices speaking in unknown languages. The transformation isn't limited to conscious experience. Witnesses undergo physical changes that become more pronounced over time. Enhanced night vision, improved healing rates, resistance to diseases that affect normal humans, and always the gradual development of what can only be described as telepathic abilities. Communication between transformed individuals occurs without spoken language. They coordinate activities across vast distances without electronic communication. They appear to share a collective memory that includes experiences from throughout the phenomenon's history. As the affected population grows, their influence on regional society increases. Businesses owned by transformed individuals prosper inexplicably. Political candidates they support win elections despite being outspent and outorganized. Infrastructure projects they oppose face mysterious delays and complications. The Brown Mountain Lights have evolved from a curiosity into something that represents either humanity's next evolutionary step or its complete extinction as an independent species. The intelligence behind the phenomenon demonstrates patience measured in centuries, implementing a transformation process so gradual that most people don't recognize it's happening until it's irreversible. What we're witnessing isn't just paranormal activity, it's the systematic conversion of human consciousness into something fundamentally different. The lights serve as both the mechanism and the signal for a transformation that will determine whether humanity maintains its individual identity or becomes absorbed into a collective intelligence that spans dimensions we can barely comprehend. The process is accelerating. The affected area continues expanding, and those who've undergone transformation speak with increasing urgency about preparing for what they describe as humanity's graduation from individual existence into something immeasurably greater. As we delve deeper into these transformative encounters, we uncover a disturbing pattern that challenges everything we thought we knew about human evolution and consciousness itself. The Brown Mountain Lights aren't just changing individuals anymore, they're orchestrating something far more profound and terrifying, a systematic rewriting of human DNA that appears to be accelerating at an exponential rate. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a geneticist who spent 2 decades studying the affected bloodlines, made a discovery in 2019 that shook the scientific community to its core. Hidden within what researchers had dismissed as junk DNA, she found active genetic sequences that shouldn't exist in human beings. Sequences that appeared to be switching on in response to proximity to the lights. These aren't random mutations. They're precise, deliberate modifications that follow a pattern so complex it suggests an intelligence far beyond our current understanding. The affected individuals aren't just developing psychic abilities or enhanced consciousness. Their very genetic structure is being rewritten to accommodate something that human biology was never designed to contain. The implications became horrifyingly clear when Vasquez analyzed blood samples from 3 generations of the Morrison family, longtime residents of the Brown Mountain region. The grandmother, born in 1940, showed baseline human DNA with only minor anomalies. Her daughter, born in 1965, after increased light activity in the area, displayed roughly 15% modified genetic material. But the granddaughter, born in 1995 during what locals called the Year of Endless Lights, possessed genetic sequences that were over 60% non-human in origin. What terrifies researchers most is that these modifications aren't causing the typical problems you'd expect from genetic abnormalities. Instead, they're creating enhanced humans who seem perfectly adapted for something that hasn't happened yet. Enhanced neural pathways that can process information at impossible speeds. Sensory organs modified to perceive dimensions beyond normal human experience. And most disturbing of all, reproductive systems that appear designed to pass these modifications to offspring with increasing intensity. The children born to these genetically modified individuals are unlike anything previously documented in human history. They demonstrate collective consciousness from birth, communicating through methods that bypass spoken language entirely. They show no fear of the lights, instead displaying an almost magnetic attraction to them. Most unsettling, they speak of memories that predate their birth, describing events and places they've never experienced, as though accessing some kind of shared ancestral database. Local hospitals have quietly documented dozens of unusual births in the region over the past decade. Babies born with eyes that reflect light, like nocturnal animals. Children who demonstrate mathematical abilities that surpass adult comprehension before they can walk. Toddlers who draw complex geometric patterns identical to those reported near light sightings, despite having no exposure to such imagery. Dr. Sarah Chen, a developmental psychologist who studied these children before her own mysterious disappearance in 2021, left behind research notes that paint a chilling picture. The children weren't just intellectually advanced, they were psychologically unified in ways that suggested they weren't truly individual consciousnesses at all, but rather fragments of something larger, using human bodies as vessels. Her final recorded observation described a playgroup of 12 children, all offspring of light-affected parents, spontaneously arranging themselves in a perfect circle and humming in harmonic frequencies that registered on seismic equipment 3 miles away. When asked what they were doing, one child responded with words that still haunt researchers. "We're calling the others home." The phenomenon isn't confined to the Brown Mountain region anymore. Similar genetic modifications have been documented in areas across Appalachia where unusual light phenomena occur. The Marfa lights in Texas, the Paulding light in Michigan, the ghost lights of Silver Cliff in Colorado. Each location shows the same pattern, increasing light activity corresponding with genetic modifications in local populations. What's emerging is a coordinated transformation affecting hundreds, possibly thousands of individuals across multiple generations. The lights aren't random phenomena. They're implementing a systematic program of human modification that appears to be preparing our species for something unprecedented. Recent satellite imagery has revealed another disturbing development. The affected individuals are unconsciously migrating towards specific geographic locations, creating concentrated populations of genetically modified humans in areas that correspond precisely with increased electromagnetic anomalies. These gathering points form a geometric pattern across the continent that matches no known natural phenomenon but bears striking resemblance to the complex geometric forms reported by light witnesses. Military intelligence sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirm that these population movements are being monitored at the highest levels of government. The affected individuals show no awareness of their migration patterns, yet they're abandoning established lives to relocate to remote areas where their presence amplifies the very phenomena that transformed them in the first place. The children born in these concentrated populations display abilities that transcend current scientific understanding. They demonstrate precognitive abilities, accurately predicting natural disasters days before they occur. They exhibit healing capabilities that seem to operate through direct manipulation of cellular regeneration. Most remarkably, they appear capable of technologically interfacing with electronic devices through direct neural connection, suggesting their modified genetics include biological components that function as organic technology. Government research facilities have attempted to study these abilities under controlled conditions, but the results defy conventional analysis. The children's capabilities seem to fluctuate based on their proximity to others like themselves, suggesting their abilities are networked rather than individual. When isolated, their enhanced capabilities diminish significantly. When grouped together, their collective abilities increase exponentially. This networking effect has profound implications for understanding the true nature of the transformation. The lights aren't creating enhanced individuals, they're creating components of a collective consciousness that becomes more powerful as more components are added to the network. Each genetically modified human functions as a node in an expanding biological computer system of staggering complexity. The transformation appears to be approaching a critical threshold. Mathematical analysis of the modification rates suggests that within the next 2 decades, the affected population will reach a tipping point where their collective consciousness achieves sufficient complexity to fundamentally alter reality itself. At that point, The distinction between the modified humans and the intelligence behind the lights may disappear entirely. Scientists studying the phenomenon have identified what they term convergence points, specific dates when light activity reaches unprecedented levels and corresponds with massive spikes in genetic modification rates. These events occur with increasing frequency, suggesting the transformation is accelerating towards some kind of culmination. The most recent convergence point, occurring during the winter solstice of 2023, produced light displays visible from space and was accompanied by the simultaneous birth of over 300 genetically modified children across 7 states. Hospital records show these births occurred at the exact moment of peak light activity, despite the mothers being in different stages of pregnancy. The implications suggest the intelligence behind the lights can manipulate human biology at the cellular level with unprecedented precision. What makes this convergence particularly significant is that the children born during this event display genetic modifications that are nearly 90% non-human. They represent a new form of life that bridges the gap between human consciousness and whatever intelligence controls the lights. They are no longer recognizably human in any biological sense, yet they retain enough human characteristics to serve as translators between the two forms of consciousness. These newest children speak of the approaching final convergence with an authority that suggests direct knowledge rather than prediction. They describe a time when the barriers between dimensions will collapse entirely, allowing the full manifestation of the intelligence that has been gradually preparing humanity for integration. They speak of this event not as conquest or replacement, but as evolution and transcendence. The Brown Mountain Lights, it seems, were never just mysterious phenomena. They were the advanced scouts of a transformation so profound it will redefine what it means to be human. The phenomenon of the Brown Mountain Lights represents far more than a regional curiosity or unexplained natural occurrence. What we've uncovered through decades of research, witness testimonies, and pattern analysis reveals a transformative process that has been accelerating exponentially since the first documented encounters. The lights aren't simply manifestations of interdimensional consciousness seeking to communicate with humanity. They are actively orchestrating the next phase of human evolution through systematic biological, neurological, and spiritual modification of our species. The evidence is undeniable. Families with generational exposure to the lights consistently produce children with enhanced psychic abilities, altered DNA sequences, and brain structures that differ significantly from baseline human neurology. These modifications aren't random mutations, but deliberate enhancements designed to prepare humanity for something unprecedented. The underground tunnel networks beneath Brown Mountain, the quartz crystal formations that amplify and conduct the light's energy, and the precise geographical positioning of sightings all point to an infrastructure that has been in place for centuries, possibly millennia. What makes this revelation particularly profound is the exponential nature of the transformation. Each generation of affected individuals exhibits more pronounced abilities than their predecessors. The children born to families with prolonged exposure aren't just psychically gifted. They demonstrate capabilities that transcend our current understanding of human potential. Remote viewing across vast distances, telepathic communication that bypasses language barriers, precognitive abilities that allow them to perceive future events with startling accuracy, and most disturbing of all, the capacity to phase partially into alternate dimensional states. The collective consciousness network that has emerged among these individuals represents a fundamental shift in human social organization. Traditional concepts of privacy, individual identity, and personal autonomy become irrelevant when minds can merge seamlessly across continental distances. These awakened individuals report experiencing shared memories, collective decision-making processes, and unified emotional states that suggest humanity is evolving toward a hive mind structure guided by non-physical intelligences operating through the brown mountain lights. Recent developments indicate this transformation is accelerating beyond all previous models. The frequency of light manifestations has increased dramatically over the past decade. Sightings now occur nightly rather than during specific atmospheric conditions. More significantly, the geographical range of activity has expanded far beyond the traditional Brown Mountain region. Similar phenomena are being reported across the entire Appalachian mountain range, with identical patterns of biological and neurological changes affecting local populations. Though interdimensional beings operating through the lights appear to be preparing for a final phase of integration, witness reports describe increasingly direct communication with the entities no longer content to influence human development through subtle biological modifications. They are actively recruiting individuals with specific genetic markers, conducting what can only be described as accelerated evolutionary procedures that compress centuries of natural development into single encounters. Those who undergo these intensive transformations emerge fundamentally altered. Their cellular structure exhibits properties that shouldn't be possible under known laws of physics. They demonstrate immunity to diseases, resistance to aging processes, and energy manipulation abilities that allow them to interface directly with electronic systems through thought alone. Most remarkably, they begin manifesting the ability to generate their own luminous phenomena, essentially becoming living conduits for the same forces that create the Brown Mountain lights. The implications for human civilization are staggering. We are witnessing the emergence of a post-human species that maintains human appearance while possessing capabilities that render them essentially superhuman. These individuals retain emotional connections to unmodified humans, but increasingly view themselves as guardians of a transformation process that will eventually encompass all of humanity, whether individuals consent or not. Government agencies tasked with monitoring these developments have reached disturbing conclusions. The transformation cannot be stopped or reversed. The interdimensional intelligences behind the phenomenon possess technology and understanding that surpasses human scientific capability by orders of magnitude. Attempts to interfere with the process have resulted in accelerated manifestations rather than containment, suggesting the entities view resistance as confirmation that more aggressive intervention is necessary. The end game appears to be the complete integration of human consciousness with interdimensional intelligence networks. Individual human identity will be preserved as component elements within a vastly expanded collective consciousness that spans multiple dimensions and potentially multiple universes. Those who embrace the transformation willingly report experiences of cosmic awareness, understanding of universal principles and access to knowledge that encompasses the history and future of countless civilizations. For those who resist, the entities have demonstrated the capacity to induce the transformation through proximity exposure alone. The Brown Mountain Lights can now project their influence across hundreds of miles, affecting individuals who have never physically visited the region. Sleep disturbances, unexplained lights in residential areas, and the gradual onset of psychic abilities among previously unaffected populations suggest that geographical isolation is no longer a protection against the phenomenon. We stand at the threshold of the most significant evolutionary leap in human history. The Brown Mountain Lights represent the visible manifestation of forces that have been guiding human development for millennia, finally revealing themselves as our species reaches the technological and spiritual maturity necessary for conscious participation in a multidimensional community of evolved intelligences. The transformation is irreversible, the process is accelerating, and humanity as we have known it for thousands of years is about to become something entirely new. The lights of Brown Mountain were never just a mystery to be solved. They were a beacon calling us home to our true nature as interdimensional beings temporarily experiencing existence in physical form. The time of separation is ending. The age of unity is beginning, and the lights will continue to shine until every human consciousness has awakened to its true potential within the infinite expanse of multidimensional reality.